And now, a special report. Summit in Alaska.
A historic handshake on Alaska's ground.
Two world leaders meet on Joint Base Elmendorf-Richardson.
I expect that today's agreements will be the starting point, not only for the solution of the Ukrainian issue, but also will help us bring back business-like and pragmatic relations between Russia and the U.S.
We had an extremely productive meeting, and many points were agreed to. There are just a very few that are left. Some are not that significant. One is probably the most significant, but we have a very good chance of getting there. We didn't get there, but we have a very good chance of getting there.
Well, we continue our coverage tonight of the U.S.-Russia summit here in Alaska today.
And of course, we have team coverage in multiple places of the state. Our team of reporters standing by on J-Bear after President Trump said there was no agreement on ending the war in Ukraine. As President Putin said, there was an understanding.
It is known that there have been no summits between Russia and the U.S. for 4 years, and that's a long time. This time was very hard for bilateral relations, and let's be frank, they have fallen to the lowest point since the Cold War. I think that's not benefiting our countries and the world as a whole.
I believe we had a very productive meeting. There were many, many points that we agreed on, most of them, I would say, a couple of big ones that we haven't quite gotten there, but we've made some headway. So there's no deal until there's a deal. I will call up NATO in a little while. I will call up the various people that I think are appropriate, and I'll, of course, call up President Zelensky and tell him about today's meeting. It's ultimately up to them.
And of course, tonight, about 4 hours after those comments, we are still waiting on Ukraine's President Zelensky for him to respond.
That's right. That as we bring you complete coverage of the summit in Alaska. We begin with our investigative teams, Augusta McDonald and political reporter Will Courtney, to update us after witnessing that press conference. Augusta and Will.
John, Rebecca, it was a long day for what turned into a relatively short press conference with no questions from the press. And as you've seen here at the Boniface entrance at J-Bear, as well as in the press room at the Arctic Warrior Event Center, there were hundreds of press on site today, as well as diplomats and dignitaries from both Russia and the United States. Lots of folks in town for this, and it was relatively, what did we come up with? 10, 15 minutes of comments? 12 minutes of comments.
Yeah. Incredibly short, and like we've mentioned, no questions answered at the press conference. And we also just heard in an NBC News report just before this as well, as President Trump was getting onto Air Force One, there was no answers to any of the press questions on board the actual plane itself. So still a lot unknown about this conference. The president himself saying there are certain disagreements that we have. Some are more severe than others. I believe he said one was very severe. What is that? You know, that's my immediate question. There is hopefully going to be a little bit more answers coming out this evening, but that's still to be seen. And as Augusta, you've mentioned, President Volodymyr Zelensky, he's going to be a key reaction to how this story develops over the weekend, or maybe over the course of the day.
Right, as Zelensky has said this week, there is no peace agreement, there is no ceasefire without Ukraine at the table. Back to you.
All right, Augusta, Will, thank you very much. And from what the presidents had to say during that news conference to how leaders reacted outside the gates.
Ariane Aram Bureau and investigative teams Johnson Kuhn live outside J-Bear to update us. Ariane, Johnson, what do you have?
Yeah, you know, Augusta really sort of summed it up perfectly. It's been a long day, and while we didn't necessarily hear exactly what we thought we would in terms of conclusions, you know, a lot of it still ended on a positive note. And from a personal perspective, I mean, to have been a part of such a huge event like this, it's been really exciting. I mean, Ariane, you've obviously been doing this a lot longer than me. Can you think of the last time that you were involved in something that had this much press, this much attention on like a global stage?
I mean, I can, and kind of the word that we've been talking about all day is just historic, in that what it is having two world leaders coming to Alaska, really putting Alaska in the spotlight. And as you mentioned, talking to a lot of our state leaders. I spoke with Senator Sullivan at length regarding his takeaway from the press conference, concerns from just the energy. Senator Sullivan was really big in saying that this was a really opportunity to showcase our military. Hence, we are outside the gates at Joint Base Elmendorf-Richardson. It is an Army base. It is an Air Force base, having the B-2 bomber, stealth bomber fly over and the F-35 jets. Senator Sullivan said he really says it put Alaska on the map and kind of showed our defense and strategic things. But again, what's going to come of this meeting and this press conference, that's what a lot of folks are really wanting to know, what's going to be happening. But we've been here all morning long, all day, and the pool of reporters, which started, I would say, a couple dozen, has now been to about less than 10 right now.
Oh, absolutely. And, you know, it's important to mention as well, we've said it a few times before, but, you know, much to many people's surprise, there was a stop and a surprise visit from President Putin at Richardson base to lay flowers at the graves of Soviet soldiers from World War II, which, again, that might have been planned on their part, but a lot of the media, we didn't know until it was happening. So I find that kind of interesting that he made the time to make that stop.
Yeah, we know both planes have taken off. Air Force One is on its way back to what we presume is Washington, D.C. But yeah, as you mentioned, Johnson, having President Putin kneel, putting a bouquet of flowers at the Soviet graves of soldiers, pilots, and sailors just really kind of speaks volumes about what could come from this. But really the whole energy around today, a lot of people have been likening the meeting between Trump and President Putin and their interaction as sort of, you know, friendly. They shook hands. There were some smiles. They rode in the motor car together on their way to the luncheon. You know, Augusta and Will kind of, you know, saying that same sentiment. But the press conference was short, so I think a lot of people right now are just wanting to know what's next, some answers, and of course a lot more details.
Yeah, I think again, it's nice to know that they walked away positive. We've seen conversations in the past not go well, right? So I mean, it's nice to see that at least everyone seems to be on the same page and made numerous comments about, you know, the need to not only end the war but ensure the protection of Ukraine. So I mean, you know, hopefully that conversation and that energy continues.
Yeah, and of course we've got interviews and coverage. If you've missed it or you're just joining us, you can certainly go find that at AlaskasNewsSource.com to kind of recap and kind of decompress from the day. There was a lot of anticipation building around what was going to be happening.
Absolutely.
And then once they met for lunch, everybody kind of, you know, reporters were getting pizza and taking a break until the press conference came back on, and then everybody was kind of like, you know, kind of waiting and seeing what was going to be happening. So, but the coverage nonetheless, I would certainly say a historic moment for not only the world, but also for the state of Alaska.
Yeah, and Senator Sullivan even mentions that, how Alaska really exudes the energy of America. And so, you know, we'll toss it back to John and Rebecca now.
Thank you so much. And of course, the summit impacting Alaskans deeply, from staunch supporters of the president to opposition to Putin being in Alaska.
Yeah, absolutely. And there were those Ukrainians who now call Alaska home, watching all of this. Lauren Maxwell continues our coverage live from downtown Anchorage's Park Strip, where another rally taking place. Lauren.
That's right. Another rally that actually, I think at least 200 people were just on the Park Strip a moment ago. I'm going to step aside. You can see the very, very tail end of them as they march through the streets of downtown Anchorage. They just started moving, and yeah, they're pretty fast considering the size of the crowd. This particular rally is sponsored by the Party for Socialism and Liberation. They told me they were anti-Trump. They told me they are anti-war, and that they would like to actually see some of the money that the United States is putting into Ukraine come back to the States for social programs and whatnot. Regardless, they said this isn't a time for politics. It's a time for people to stand together and try and end the war. And we should mention, this was just one of several rallies that took place today. It started earlier this morning, the Alaska Republicans sponsoring a rally, and a lot of folks out there telling me they were very happy to see the president here, welcoming him to Alaska, and very hopeful that he would be able to broker some kind of a deal. Lots of excitement at that rally. And that continued for a while. We had another one on the Park Strip a little bit later, and that was a Stand Up for Ukraine rally that took place probably about 2 o'clock today. And I have to say that one probably had more in attendance than any that I've seen. It looked like hundreds of people were there. They also had a huge Ukrainian flag that they hoisted up in the air, so that also was very exciting. It's just a time when everyone is coming out and feeling confident about expressing their opinion on this. And I just have to say that, you know, everyone that I've talked to today, and there have been numerous people, all of them want the same thing. They may want to go about it in different ways, but all of them feel very strongly about ending the war. No surprise there, but they are Alaskans. They want to speak their minds, and yeah, they've been heard today. We've spoken to quite a few of them. So back to you guys.
Lauren Maxwell, a lot to take in today. Thank you for sharing your experience. And as Putin and Trump met today for the summit here, Ukrainians also rallying outside of Kiev's U.S. embassy, wanting to bring awareness to thousands of prisoners of war still in Russian captivity. A poll by the Kiev International Institute of Sociology shows a large majority of Ukrainians want a negotiated settlement to end the violence between Ukraine and Russia. Many Ukrainians who participated in that poll say they are against any deals secured with crushing concessions they feel would weaken or leave Ukraine at a disadvantage. All right, also a topic of high interest to Alaskans, the controversial role of the state's rare minerals before the historic summit. Next, why Governor Mike Dunleavy calls that a rumor after meeting with the president.
And Putin puts a focus on Fairbanks' past. That's during protests in the Golden Heart City. The Russian leader talks about downtown Fairbanks of a statue there. Our coverage continues in 90 seconds.
And now, a special report, Summit in Alaska.
We talked to the president about these rumors that Alaska's minerals are going to be sold off to the Russians, or Alaskans' gas is going to be transported by the Russians. We spoke with him and some of his staff on the plane, and that's not true. This is, some would say that's fake news, some would say that's rumors.
And that was video Governor Mike Dunleavy posted to social media just moments after speaking with the president aboard Air Force One before today's summit at J-Bear, outright denying a British newspaper's report that President Trump could be using Alaska minerals to secure a peace deal.
And that rumor, as the governor calls it, just one of the topics that Joe Allgood and Justin Mattson spoke to the governor about after he sent out that video.
Justin and Joe, what did you guys take away from your conversation with the governor?
Yeah, John and Rebecca, we met with Governor Dunleavy at the Denina Center after he met with President Trump this morning on Air Force One.
Now, this was before the joint press conference with Trump and Putin, but Dunleavy was very emphatic that Alaskan minerals were not on the table.
That's right. The British newspaper The Guardian had reported that the Russians would try to make a deal with President Trump on rare earth minerals here in Alaska. Those minerals are, of course, crucial to both technology like cell phones and weapon systems. Alaska has 49 out of 50 of them. So the governor told us he felt compelled to clear that up pretty quickly.
We just talked about some of the rumors we were hearing in the press that the Russians were thinking about making a deal with the federal government on Alaska's minerals, and the Russians were thinking about transporting our gas on their LNG tankers. And so we asked for clarification, and the folks in the plane, including the president's people, dispelled those myths that that's not what was happening.
And as far as those other natural resources, Russia has a large supply of oil and gas. The governor continued to criticize the decision of some European and Asian countries to continue to purchase gas and oil from Russia, saying that's part of what's helping fund the war.
And you heard the governor there mention LNG, so a potential gas pipeline did come up during our discussions. Dunleavy told us that that the project will have more information later this year and could include investments into that project. Dunleavy saying he briefly mentioned the LNG project to the president.
Here in the Pacific, our big gas line project, we believe is going to come to fruition sometime around December, January. We begin that process then at that point of building the pipeline, and can supply our Asian allies in the Pacific with the gas, hopefully for the next 50, 60 years.
Now, the governor did say he made it a point to bring up a potential gas pipeline in Alaska as he met with the president.
And when he was asked if there were going to be a future summit, Governor Dunleavy remained hopeful that the future summit would be held here in Alaska. Back to you guys.
And from the governor to the congressional delegation, what state leaders are saying about the long-anticipated meeting.
We have imposed.
And now, a special report, Summit in Alaska.
And our complete coverage of the Trump-Putin summit here in Alaska with what Alaska's congressional delegation thought, starting with Senator Murkowski's discussion with the president.
I
I had an opportunity to speak with the president briefly yesterday before he left Washington, D.C. And he shared with me much of what he has shared to the public. He says, you know, it's either gonna go bad real quick, or maybe we're gonna be able to do something.
Well, it apparently hasn't. Nothing's happened real quick. I mean, they're still meeting, so that's a good sign.
I do think Alaskans could be proud that the strength of our state and the choice of our state and the strategic location of our state was chosen, and I guarantee it made an impression on the Russians and made an impression on the whole world, because the whole world was watching this.
Peace requires dialogue. If we're going to get to a peaceful solution to this war, we're going to have these conversations, and it's good that we're having those discussions and that it happened on our home turf. And I think what we saw from President Trump in the first 6 months was a prioritization of resolving this conflict and many others around the world. President Zelensky in Washington, D.C. to have conversations before this conversation occurred. And hopefully what we're seeing is the evolution of a brokering of a peace agreement.
And still ahead, we are live with an organizer of the Alaska's Ukraine Relief Program. And since the summit in Alaska was announced, we've heard so many opinions from Ukrainians now calling Alaska home as they anticipated the meeting and watched it all play out live.
Yeah, joining us now, Zori Opanasevich with the Ukraine Relief Program. Zori, we appreciate you. I imagine it's been a very emotional day. Can you tell us kind of what you're thinking right now, since a ceasefire was not actually announced?
Yeah, thank you for having us again. We wanted a ceasefire, of course. We wanted to, as someone who cares about human life, as a Ukrainian American, I wanted to see a ceasefire. That is something that we were hoping for. We didn't get that. We don't know what we got. We were told that there's progress, but I think we're just going to have a lot of speculation now. We're hopeful that President Trump said he wants another meeting, and we're very grateful for that. We appreciate that. What if there was something decided, and what if they're just waiting to tell President Zelensky and the NATO partners, and then we'll get the good news? Maybe President Trump just learned who Mr. Putin is now. We don't know what that is, and we'll have a lot of speculation, but we're hopeful and looking forward to what the next meeting will bring.
Yeah, appreciate your thoughts.
Absolutely. And you know, one thing I thought was pretty interesting was at one point President Putin said that Ukraine and Russia are like brothers.
Right.
What did you make of that?
I don't know. I don't even think I can have an opinion on that, because my focus is the people. They're left in confusion. They're left with more questions. You know, we were holding on and excited for maybe what could happen. What if today's going to be the day that we're not going to have to worry so much? But we didn't see that, so we're just going to keep waiting, and that's all we can do for now.
That is all we can do. But, you know, a little positive. I mean, there was some quotes from Trump talking about extremely productive meeting, great progress, talk of a second meeting that would include Zelensky. How do you feel about what's to come?
Well, I hope that there is a meeting, and like I said, maybe that second meeting that's going to happen is going to include Ukraine at the table, and then we will have that good news that we're waiting for. What I know right now is people back in Ukraine, people here in Anchorage and Alaska, don't have any news, and so things are going to be as usual probably for Ukraine. We'll have to, again, wait and see, because nothing was told.
All right. Zori Opanasevich, thank you so much with the Ukraine Relief Foundation. We appreciate you coming in.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
And it's hard to believe, but today is also the start of the state fair. When we come back, we're going to take a live look there and talk with Alaskans there reacting to this historic day.
All right, usually today, the state fair, it would be the biggest news of the day, right? It's kicking off today. Many Alaskans showed up, while a lot of eyes, of course, on that J-Bear Summit.
Danny Dumpkins joins us from the fair, and she's talking to people there about how they're feeling about this historic summit, when she really should just be eating a bunch of food.
Right? Fair food. Come on, Danny.
Hi, John. Hi, Rebecca. It is the first day of the Alaska State Fair, the same day as the historical meeting between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin. And as you can see, many Alaskans decided to come here instead of staying home and watching coverage from there. I'm joined with Chris Whalen, who's going to talk to me a little bit about his choice of being here today. Can you tell me why you chose to be here today instead of at home?
Well, you can't beat the first day at the Alaska State Fair. You've got the great food. You've got all the rides. I mean, you've got all the people. It's just amazing. It's a perfect day. Great weather today. No, I mean, we just love getting to come out here and get to try everything and, you know, see the fair on the first day. Everyone's getting used to it. Everyone's getting warmed up. It's just an amazing day.
Awesome. And how do you feel about the summit being in Alaska?
Oh, I mean, it's actually fascinating. They had it in the 49th state. I guess it really shows the whole world how important Alaska really is and how close it is in between Russia and the United States. Perfect place for a meeting, if you ask me.
Yeah, that's amazing. And so the fair is going to be through Labor Day. And so as you can see, there's rides, there's awesome food, there's vendors. Can you tell me what you're most looking forward to about the fair?
I'm going to go on the Ferris wheel right now, and then I think we're going to definitely get some cheese curds and probably some donuts.
Okay, that sounds great. I can't have any of those because I'm gluten-free, but it's pretty amazing to be here and see how people are here, even with a huge historic day. And so, yes, come out to the fair, get your food, see the vendors, do the rides, and just enjoy the community in Alaska. I'm Danny Tompkins with Alaska's News Source. Back to you.
Gluten-free, Danny.
They got some gluten-free options at
Sure
the
they
fair, no
do.
doubt, no doubt.
All right, tonight we continue following the impacts of the summit in Alaska.
And for those of us leaving, or for those of you leaving us from Fairbanks, we'll see you back tonight with the late edition. Stay tuned, 6:30. Rest.
And now, a special report. Summit in Alaska.
Well, now that the much-anticipated handshake has happened, what's next for the war in Ukraine?
As we come on the air at 6:30, we have continuing coverage of the summit in Alaska on those impacts. Our team has been with you all day, now looking ahead to what the summit impacts mean. That's after President Putin suggests the next meeting should happen in Moscow. President Trump had said that it should be in Alaska, of course. So our investigative team, Augusta McDonald, political reporter Will Courtney, back again before there's a next meeting. We need to hear from Ukraine's president. Augusta and Will, what are you hearing?
At this point, of course, we're still waiting to hear whether or not President Zelensky will respond in any timely fashion. But of course, with all of the historical significance of today, it was also significant that we didn't get a ceasefire, or, you know, the folks who are invested in seeing that happen didn't get the deal that they were so hoped for, like Zori, who's been in our studio all day talking about what that would mean to Ukrainians here in our community.
And, you know, one thing, Augusta, that you and Will were there kind of front and center, seeing all this action unfold while you were mentioning, and you kind of reiterated on this, talking about how kind of short this press conference was, and that they didn't take any questions from reporters. What do you make of that?
Yeah, well, 12 minutes, right? 12 minutes was exactly how long it took for the president to, for both presidents to deliver their speeches to the joint press conference. But press conference is maybe a stretch too far. I mean, it was just the president's talking on a pedestal, and the press did not get the opportunity to ask questions. After he got onto Air Force One, he also avoided other questions. There is reportedly going to be an interview with Sean Hannity that will hopefully answer some of those questions. The key ones being what happened, right? Zori was even mentioning herself that, you know, for Ukrainians, you know, what do we take out of this meeting when, you know, it sounds positive, there are expectations for the future, but they're vague. They're not clear right now.
Yeah, and you know, really putting Alaska on the map, we've kind of been talking about that all day. Historic, those are the words that are coming out of this. Yeah. Agreements were made between this, but again, the details are really kind of sparse. So a lot of people are wondering, what are those next steps? Of course, Johnson, Kuhn, and I have been out here in front of Joint Base Elmendorf all morning. Really, it's kind of back to business as usual, if you will. The pool of reporters has kind of dwindled down to, I'd say, less than 10, but nonetheless, though, it really put Alaska on the map, Johnson. Really kind of highlighting the strategic, you know, Jay Bear's no stranger to hosting world leaders.
Oh, absolutely. And I think that, as we've been saying all day, this was the most appropriate place to hold a meeting like this, just based on the security, the joint efforts with the Air Force and Army. But then it also just speaks volumes of the history between Alaska and Russia, and being able to hold an event like this in the state. I mean, Senator Sullivan spoke to you about that earlier today, just how Alaska really exudes the American energy, and I think that it was his idea of sending, it's a clear message to not just Russia, but the whole world.
Yeah, and that interview.
Yes, we actually just got notice that there is going to be an interview happening right now with Sean Hannity. So obviously, as we mentioned, open story. We're going to learn more as the hours develop and as we go into the weekend.
And of course, Alaskans also famous, lots of opinions that we have all over the place, and we are not afraid to make the world know how we feel as Alaskans.
Loud and proud. We saw protests and rallies all across the state. We're going to check back in now with Lauren Maxwell. She's downtown, where we had hundreds of people showing up for the rally today, hours after we saw the president's supporters. Lauren, you've been all over the place.
Yeah. From morning till whatever. Hey, there's kind of a last burst of enthusiasm here. You can see behind me, we've got a lot of folks just lining the streets with signs. This is one of the bigger rallies, actually. I would say easily 200 people who marched through downtown Anchorage. They've just returned, and some of them are posting up here. This is put on by a political group that calls itself the Party for Socialism and Liberation, and they're getting a lot of encouraging honks, as you can hear, people going home. They do have a political agenda, but they told me they're anti-Trump and they're anti-war. And a lot of the folks that I spoke with today who were marching said that's their concern more than anything. They just want this war to end. And of course, that's the message we've been hearing from everyone that we've spoken to. Even people this morning, I shouldn't say even, but people this morning that were at a Republican rally. And that rally was billed as something that was very much pro-President Trump. That was organized to help support the president there. And so, again, a lot of enthusiasm that started this morning. Another rally midday on the Park Strip where they unveiled a giant Ukrainian flag standing for Ukraine. And that was really something to see. So it's just one of these things that has really woken up our city, woken up our citizens. And they're out here. They want to make their opinions known. And to a man, all of them want this war to end.
During the Second World War, it was here in Alaska that was the origin of the legendary air bridge for the supply of military aircraft and other equipment under the Lend-Lease program. That was a dangerous and treacherous route over the vast emptiness of ice. However, the pilots of both countries did everything to bring closer the victory.
And President Putin spending some time there during that short news conference to talk about the significance of a historic moment, Russian-American moment, now memorialized in Fairbanks.
In Fairbanks. Adrian Peterson takes us downtown to tell us all about that history.
Here in downtown Fairbanks, what's called the Lend-Lease Memorial is what you see right here. It honors interior history from 84 years ago when American and Russian soldiers met in Fairbanks to hand off planes. That Alaska-Russian history leading to the summit in Anchorage. Russian President Vladimir Putin talked about it during the news conference with President Trump, at a time when this symbol of past cooperation is in a very different place. Still, interior leaders say this meeting is important.
It's really important because we've seen sort of incursions from the Russians and the Chinese just off the coast of Alaska. We've seen an influx of fishermen and fisheries coming very close to Alaska waters.
That's been happening for decades up here, but it is easy to make mistakes, and that's why they need to be talking.
Hundreds attended a protest Thursday in downtown Fairbanks. For those from Ukraine who now call Alaska home, there are still strong feelings.
I really want peace in that country, and for first to cease the fire and have maybe more members of that round table to discuss the problem, to see where the problem is, and stop treating Putin as he's a criminal. He's a war criminal, and that's it.
The hope for many in the interior, as this statue shows, is we will soon move closer to seeing what type of cooperation the future holds. Adrian Peterson, Alaska's news source.
So Alaska and Russia share a long history. The state says that the first Russian explorer came here in the 1600s.
And of course, that led to Russian expeditions for sea otter pelts, furs, and later colonization. Later, it meant fears of war on Alaskan soil. In fact, you can still see a little of Russia all over Alaska. At this home, little Mishka makes sure you know she's in charge.
What does Mishka mean?
Little bear.
She's the little dog sister to Anna.
You guys are lucky you have a normal name.
And the dog baby to Lena Roik, a former Russian who's been living here in Anchorage for the past 7 years.
I was born and raised there, yeah. I went to medical school there.
But she's not going back, at least not now.
Russia's your homeland. Would you ever go back and visit?
Sure, one day, maybe, when it's gonna be safe.
What's concerning to her is that Russian President Vladimir Putin is coming here to talk with President Donald Trump about the war in Ukraine.
But it kind of raises concern and gets a lot of anxiety of Putin coming here and having the negotiation without Ukraine being involved.
Alaska and Russia have deep history, religious connections, and similar landscapes, cultural ties and connections with other cities in Russia.
Yeah, it's from Yakutsk. Yakutia, that's a place in Russia. That's where this is from.
At the closest point, the two countries are separated by only a few miles.
I'm David Ramsar, a longtime Alaskan, and I wrote a book called Melting the Ice Curtain.
President Trump's meeting will happen on the largest military base in the state, at the place that was built in the 1940s as a critical defense point to stop threats from the Soviet Union during the Cold War. Ramsar says most Russians who live here now moved to Alaska in the 80s and 90s.
A number of Russians moved here to attend the university at in-state tuition rates, to start businesses and start families, and a number of them are still here. I suspect they're pretty split on whether they want Putin here. He's not universally loved.
She's 1 year and a half.
He's not loved in this house either.
A grumpy teenager.
All right, we'll be back in about 90 seconds.
We're here from state leaders reacting to today's historic meeting.
And now, a special report, Summit in Alaska.
And we're going to hear from some of the members of our delegation. Of course, the governor, a lot happening today, a lot to react to.
All right, yeah, we're going to continue our coverage of the summit in Alaska. Here's what state leaders are saying.
And we just talked about some of the rumors we were hearing in the press that the Russians were thinking about making a deal with the federal government on Alaska's minerals, and the Russians were thinking about transporting our gas on their LNG tankers. And so we asked for clarification, and the folks in the plane, including the president's people, dispel those myths that that's not what was happening. And so after that, we wish them luck on the discussions, and we welcome those guys to Alaska. You know, some of us just briefly mentioned to the president and others there, for example, Secretary Lutnick, that we appreciate their help on our gas line and all the work they're doing for Alaska.
I will tell you, though, standing there on the tarmac as Putin's plane came in, not on its own, but flanked by our fighter jet escorts, bringing them into our airspace. And as that plane put down, for them to peel off, and then to have the flyover,
yeah.
B-52,
right,
and the F-22s right there in the air as Putin is walking below that, it sent a pretty powerful signal.
The president told me, look, he wanted this summit to be in Alaska. I think one of the reasons is there's no doubt that the Trump administration is unleashing the strength of America in a lot of different ways, and that is why Putin came here. There's no doubt the threat of sanctions, secondary sanctions, so the buyers of Russian oil, India, China, Brazil, those are crushing sanctions. I'm one of the original co-sponsors on this big bill to do that. The president has threatened that. He already announced sanctions on India when they purchase Russian oil. So it's that strength, it's the strength of our military, it's the strength of American energy.
I think the proof's in the pudding. So ultimately, it's going to be about ceasefires, agreements, and watching what troops do on the ground. I think that's how we build trust in a situation like this, is not hearing what people say, but watching what folks do. And as President Trump said, we're going to hear from President Zelensky at some point. He's got some phone calls to make. The president said that he was going to be on the phone with folks at NATO and then later with President Zelensky. And we'll see how President Zelensky responds to what appears to be some outline of a potential agreement for ending this conflict.
Now, all those thoughts come as Alaska and Russia have centuries of historic ties. And in 2 minutes, we're going to examine those deep ties.
Presidents Trump and Putin set the stage for a possible second summit on the war in Ukraine. The first round of those talks, of course, happened on land that did not always belong to the United States.
Political reporter Will Courtney takes a look at that history between Alaska and Russia and the summit's significance.
We're going to have a meeting with Russia.
1 week after President Trump's announcement, historian Charles Wohlforth said Russian President Vladimir Putin will be one of, if not the first, Russian leader to step foot on Alaskan soil.
I believe that a Russian head of state has ever been to Alaska. The first Russians to arrive in Alaska are, of course, 1741, when Vitus Bering was sent to explore.
Russia sold Alaska to the United States in 1867, after they were defeated in the Crimean War. A war in a land that took place in parts of what is now Ukraine.
And that was the backdrop for the decision by Russia to sell, because they were at war with Britain. They did not want to allow the British to gain control of Alaska.
Longtime Alaska journalist Tim Bradner said in World War II, a meeting between U.S. President Franklin Delano Roosevelt and Soviet dictator Joseph Stalin almost took place in Fairbanks. Bradner said Alaska has a long history of foreign officials arriving to the state.
Well, we've had a lot of very distinguished foreign leaders come through Alaska. We've had several presidents. I remember President Nixon visiting here. We've had, we had Emperor Hirohito was here. His first trip outside Japan. The Pope was here.
We meet in Anchorage, Alaska.
The history of Alaska and the history of Russia are deeply, deeply intertwined. And really, from the beginning of when we have written history of Alaska to the present, they're inextricably related to each other.
That historic relationship now with a focus on negotiating ending the war in Ukraine.
And if it's a fair deal, I'll reveal it to the European Union leaders and to the NATO leaders and also to President Zelensky. I think out of respect, I'll call him first. And then I'll call them after. And I may say, lots of luck, keep fighting. Or I may say, we can make a deal.
If you're the president, why would you want Alaska to be the setting for this meeting?
Well, it would be sort of symbolic that Putin came to U.S. soil. Some people are saying it's kind of a victory for Putin to be invited to the U.S.
The president has signaled this will not be the final meeting over the war.
There's a very good chance that we're going to have a second meeting, which will be more productive than the first. Because
saying there will be, quote, serious consequences if a ceasefire deal is not reached on J-Bear. Will Courtney, Alaska's news source.
Now, you may remember during a call with President Zelensky and European leaders on Wednesday, they urged President Trump not to make a ceasefire deal on his own with Putin without Zelensky. And tonight, that is still where we stand.
And from that history to putting the war in Ukraine in perspective, what President Trump said about those devastating loss of life.
What you're seeing right now, video of one of today's airstrikes in Ukraine. At least one civilian was killed. We're seeing the aftermath of the strike in Ukraine near the border with Russia. The strike hit civilian infrastructure. Another attack in central Ukraine damaged a truck and a minibus, killing one civilian.
And to put the war's impact in perspective, earlier today, while on board Air Force One traveling to Alaska, the president talked about how many people are being killed.
But what I do care about is they lost last week 7,011 people were lost, almost all soldiers. 36 people in a town which got hit by a missile, but over 7,000 soldiers. It's crazy.
And again, this is that airstrike from earlier today where one person was killed, a civilian, and there was a fire that was started.
The latest deaths not accounted for in these numbers come from June, from or I should say by the Center for Strategic and International Studies, or CSIS, which is a D.C. bipartisan nonprofit research group. As of June 3rd, they report the casualties, meaning to total of those killed and wounded, and deaths since the war began 3.5 years ago. Reported Russia a total of 950,000 casualties, 250,000 deaths. Ukraine, 400,000 casualties, 60 to 100,000 deaths.
And we'll be right back.
Well, Alaska, known for its extreme weather. Fortunately for today's summit, though, it was pretty quiet. Just a little drizzle out there.
Drizzle.
Yeah.
Chief Meteorologist Melissa Fry joins us now. Melissa, how are the conditions like for the rest of the night?
Just better and better, really. We did have that cloud cover. About 12 o'clock, the clouds lowered in. We got that drizzle right over Jerry Bear, but then that has been clearing ever since. Planes coming and going as we move into the afternoon. More sunshine and temperatures holding in the low 60s. Cameras, though, have been bouncing around a little bit in those wind gusts. We've seen some breezy winds here across South Central, gusts to 22 miles per hour in Anchorage, even higher down near Kodiak, up to 51. And we'll see those breezy winds across South Central from the north tonight into tomorrow morning. So be prepared for that. Otherwise, we will hold on to a little bit of cloud cover tonight. There's still some drizzle in the area. That's all still clearing as we head into tomorrow. Mostly sunny, though, for your Saturday afternoon. Temperatures start out in the low 40s. Up north, we'll see upper 40s near Anchorage, eventually getting back into the mid 60s in the afternoon. We do have some showers lingering in Fairbanks, pushing east. Rain continues in southeast, some showers in Ukiyavik, and some light rain down the west coast. But I do expect those dry conditions to return to South Central. Temperatures are warming as we head through the weekend. Again, watch out for those breezy winds tomorrow, but otherwise sunny and mild, up to 68 Sunday. We'll keep it in those upper 60s Monday. Chance of a little light rain, really some drizzle here midweek, but temperatures not dropping much, holding right there in those low to mid 60s. And through the interior, still holding on to some light rain at times here Saturday and Sunday, but then improving conditions as we head into next week. More sunshine, and those high temperatures do get back into the mid 60s. So if you have plans to get out and about this weekend, especially if you're in South Central and eventually into the interior, we are going to see some very nice conditions with that sunshine making a big comeback for South Central again. It's going to be warm, close to 70 degrees. Just watch out for those winds tomorrow. Otherwise, I think it's going to be a great weekend. Nice to see the sunshine returning.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
big weekend. We got the football back. Yeah.
And the fair.
And the fair.
The fair.
And we got some nice weather. Melissa,
Absolutely.
thank you very much.
Thanks, Melissa.
Hey, still to come on the late edition. Later this evening, you're going to hear from a member of the Russian delegation, what he had to say about today's summit, and discover why he believes even more productive meetings, or a meeting, could be on the horizon, and how these conversations will lead to stronger economic cooperation between the United States and Russia. That's tonight on the late edition.
And tonight, a little treat, Melissa will be anchoring with Adelmi, so that'll be a fun thing to be part of as well.
Very cool.
And of course, a historic day in Alaska. Thank you, as always, for trusting Alaska's news source. Please see you back here for the late edition.